Have you ever looked at something happening right in front of you? Maybe a houseplant looking a little sad and wilted in your kitchen, or ice melting suspiciously fast on your front porch. And you thought to yourself, well, why exactly did that happen? We solve these little everyday mysteries all the time, but there's a really massive difference between just taking a wild guess and actually knowing the truth. So today, we're diving into the ultimate toolkit for finding that truth. We're going to set the stage for how we can understand the world logically, systematically, and most importantly, with absolute confidence.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our source material really hits the nail on the head with this quote. The scientific method helps you move from guessing to proving. Because let's be honest, as humans, we absolutely love to assume things, right? We love to guess, but guessing leaves a huge margin for error. When we use a structural process instead, we completely eliminate that guesswork, and we establish solid, undeniable proof.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. From guessing to proving. 2. The 6-step process. 3. Solving the seed mystery. And 4. Science in the real world. Let's get into it.
Section 1. From guessing to proving.
Let's start with the formal definition. The scientific method is a step-by-step process used to investigate questions and solve problems. Honestly, you can think of this as a cognitive safety net or even a logical magnifying glass for scientists. It stops our brains from just jumping to flawed conclusions by forcing us to slow down a bit. It makes us work carefully and logically so that when we finally do arrive at an answer, we know for a fact that it's the right one.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core shift in our mindset. Guessing is simply assuming something is true without a shred of proof. Proving, on the other hand, relies entirely on evidence-based learning. This method completely flips our approach from making random, shot-in-the-dark assumptions to actually establishing solid facts that are backed up by real, tangible evidence.
Section 2. The 6-step process.
So the crucial point is that this is a strict, sequential framework. It goes observation, question, prediction, experiment, result, and finally conclusion. You really can't just skip around here. And it's actually pretty fascinating to think about the fact that so many of history's most brilliant inventions began right here at steps 1 and 2, with curious people simply making a basic observation and asking a question. Everything else just cascades naturally from that initial spark of curiosity. I do want to pause specifically on step number 3 for a second, prediction. The source material defines a prediction as a possible answer before testing, and our text explicitly warns us that skipping the prediction is a really common mistake that learners make. But skipping it is kind of like throwing a dart while wearing a blindfold and then drawing the bullseye around wherever the dart happened to land. Stating your prediction is absolutely vital because it establishes exactly what you're trying to prove or disprove before you even run your test. Moving on to section 3, solving the seed mystery. Remember, observation must always come before questioning. Our classroom example starts super simply. A plant is wilting. The class just noticed something happening right there in their environment, and they stop to actually take a closer look. And that visual observation naturally leads right into step 2, the question, does it need water? Which is followed immediately by step 3, the prediction. The learners predicted, it will recover after watering. Or, if we apply this to seeds given enough water will grow better. They've now set a very clear baseline to go ahead and test. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the setup for the experiment itself. To test their prediction, they didn't just water a single seed and cross their fingers. No, they planted beans in 2 separate tents. Container 1 was watered regularly, while container 2 was kept completely dry. This introduces the super important concept of a fair test. You absolutely need a point of comparison, a control group essentially, to actually prove that the water is the thing making the difference rather than it just being a coincidence. And that brings us to step 5, recording the results. After 1 week, we see some really clear documented data. Container 1, which was watered daily, successfully germinated. Container 2, which was kept dry, did not germinate. The source really stresses how incredibly important it is for scientists to document these findings accurately. Because if you don't record your results properly, you literally lose your evidence. And boom, you're right back to guessing. Which leads directly to the final step, step 6, conclusion. I absolutely love this core mantra from the source text. Conclusions should be based on evidence. By drawing a conclusion based entirely on those meticulously recorded results, we can definitively answer our initial question. We aren't just guessing that seeds need water anymore. We've proven it, for sure, through a fair test.
Section 4. Science in the real world.
Let's move to and see how this builds across human society as a whole. Because the scientific method isn't just for, little school experiments. It is the absolute backbone of agriculture, medicine, food production, engineering, environmental protection, you name it. When medical researchers are developing life-saving treatments, or when engineers are building massive bridges, they are relying entirely on this exact same simple six-step process to make absolutely sure their solutions actually work in the real world. But the source text asks a brilliant, challenging question here. What can happen if an experiment is not fair? I really want you to think about the immense danger of a flawed test. If your experiment is biased in some way, or if you fail to record results accurately, you end up drawing conclusions that just aren't supported by the evidence. In fields like medicine or engineering, drawing a false conclusion because of an unfair test doesn't just ruin the integrity of your investigation, it can actually have catastrophic real-world consequences. So it's absolutely crucial to practice this. The source text challenges us to practice this kind of intentionality in our daily lives, even with something as incredibly simple as testing whether salt dissolves faster in warm or cold water. By setting up a fair test, making an accurate observation, and carefully recording your results, you're engaging in a fun, low-stakes way to train your brain to default to investigation rather than just making an assumption. So I want to wrap up this explainer by leaving you with this direct homework prompt pulled straight from the text. How can you use the scientific method to explain a household observation today? You've got the toolkit now to make that jump from guessing to proving. But honestly, it leaves us with a much larger question. In a modern world that is just totally overflowing with information, how many of our daily beliefs are built on flimsy guesses? And what would happen if we finally stepped up and demanded proof? Think about that.